every team has these questions of like, they're competitive, but so if the Bruins are in that spot and their strengths lie in kind of what you need to follow your way in the playoffs in terms of a great defense and a really strong goaltending, and you figure out the scoring along the way, and maybe it all works out. Maybe Lysel's a 18 goal scorer and he has a great season, or maybe you have to address at the deadline. You can, I think, roll with the punches and try to shore up your offense as the year goes on. But if your strengths are rooted in your goaltending and defense, and you've got a battle-tested group that had a pretty successful playoff run last year, I think you like your chances.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat on CLNS Media, presented by PrizePicks and Gametime. Go to PrizePicks, use that promo code CLNS to get up to $100 cash back on that first deposit. Red Sox are looking good. Make the game a little more fun. Go to PrizePicks, use that promo code CLNS, and go to Gametime. Use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. Again, Connor, the Red Sox. How about them Red Sox?
Pretty good. Time to buy, baby. Time to buy.
Time to buy tickets. I don't know if the front office isn't going to buy any players, but you can buy tickets. But anyway, go to PrizePicks and Gametime. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. This is a big week for you. Big week. Anything big happening? Anything big happening this week for you? Huh? I wonder.
Check. Yeah, I don't know. It all blends together once you get to the summer months, right, Evan?
It does. Yeah. Crazy 4th of July weekend, I imagine. And now, big event of your summer, the wedding.
Yeah.
The big wedding.
Running all over the Commonwealth this week. So
and when the Bruins trade for Leon Draisaitl, Ty Anderson and I will be live on set at the wedding doing a podcast.
Hell of an emergency podcast. Yeah, you probably don't want my input. If that's at like 11 o'clock at night, you may not want any commentary from me. So.
Well, I heard it was open bar, so I don't think you'll want my commentary.
That's true. Yeah.
Either I don't think but
it's just gonna be it's gonna be just a lot of holy shit.
Yeah, I can't like Tim Robinson, and I think you should leave. Like, what the hell? Like,
yes,
flabbergasted. I love Bruins Facebook. I'll occasionally I don't know what I think it's called bruinsinsider.com or something. I'm sending people to go read it, which is honestly really funny. So like go check them out. You'll get some great Bruins information there, but I'll be scrolling Facebook every now and again, and I will come across one of their posts on Facebook, and it'll be, like major development in Leon Draisaitl to the Bruins. And I'm always like, let me look into this. And they had the Draisaitl spelt completely wrong, like Drey, and then like separate, like space SAYTL or something. It was great. It was awesome.
Nice.
So love the insight that Bruins Facebook provides me. And then the comments are even better. Like the comments are like taking it very seriously and everything.
It's like the Facebook comments you have for like the group. It's like the community Facebook group for like, I'm sure Framingham has one. Southie has one.
Many.
And they're all terrible. It's just people like just trying to dunk on each other, typing through their laptop screen, acting like big tough guys. When it's like someone's like, "Do you know?" It's like, "Do you know where we can park correctly so we don't get a ticket?" And people are like, "You should kill yourself." It's like, guys, like they're just asking for input. They don't want a ticket.
You're right. That is what it is. Like,
don't be an asshole.
Like, hey, like the one in Framingham. It'll be like,
where can we take our kid to get a skating lessons? You know, the old Southie used to that they raised you on skates. You bunch of fucking babies. I was like, no, they're asking for input. Like, can you please give a helping hand here? No, you can't do that on Facebook. Facebook is the worst, and we're talking about us who operate on Twitter. So.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's its own cesspool, but like Facebook is like a darker cesspool. Like there's a lot of funny stuff on Twitter. There's a lot of memes. Like my For You page on Twitter now will have just like those random tweets that have like 7 words in them with an account that has like maybe like 500 followers, and the tweet has like 500,000 likes. And it's like, all right, that's actually like a really good tweet. I'm glad that got picked up. But then Facebook, it's just like, it's like middle-aged people just
being
trash each other. Yeah.
Typing through the safety of their laptop makes them feel like big tough.
Yes.
Guys.
Yes, but you're right. Like the Framingham group, be like, "Oh, we just moved here. Like, what's the best schools for the kids?" And it'll just be like two middle fingers, you know,
Yes,
like.
exactly.
And I'm like, come on,
Framingham's different from when I grew up back in '48. Like,
yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
Friggin' Truman was president when you were there.
Paul Revere was running through the streets of Framingham.
Rutherford B. Hayes was running shit while you're shouting out Framingham. So
Friendlies was a well earned establishment in Framingham.
there was about 500 friendlies back then. It was 11. There's 11 in the whole country
back in the day. Anyways, a little bit of Bruins news, real Bruins news. Jeremy Swayman avoids arbitration. People were very nervous last week, coming down to the deadline on Friday of, would Jeremy Swayman elect to go to arbitration? And then the question was, will the Bruins elect to go to arbitration with Jeremy Swayman? Both were no's, which that means that they can just continue to negotiate this contract and there's no deadline. Now, he can be offer sheeted, which would be a hell of a story. That'll happen at your wedding. Like the Seattle Kraken will offer sheet Jeremy Swayman at your wedding. It will be fantastic. But of the 7 teams, none of them really doesn't make a ton of sense for them to do it. I don't think it'll happen. So what it looks like, and Jeremy Swayman was in the Bruins schedule announcement video. They clearly view Jeremy Swayman as a core piece. I think it's safe to say he gets signed. I think it's just a matter of when and for what price. But at least there's no deadline hanging over their head for arbitration.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you listen, Jeremy Swayman made no bones about how much he hated going to arbitration, elected for it last year, and the Bruins carried out with it. Again, I don't think it's fun for anyone to go to arbitration in terms of the team who is trying to sign you is like, yeah, you're good, but you're not that good. And we have the charts and the PowerPoint slideshows to back it up, right? You don't want to hear your own team kind of more or less diminish your value.
That would be crazy. Imagine a PowerPoint on like how you suck.
Yes, it's like, and it's just phenomenal. It's just natural stat trick. It's like, well, your high danger save percentage, John. No, so again, not fun. I think for anyone that have to go through that, especially when it's your own team. That again, it's a business. It's dollars and cents. It's about getting the best value. And Swayman mentioned that, but still not fun. And I think yes, it's I think promising in terms of both Swayman and his representatives and the Bruins in terms of what being like, all right, let's not have this hovering over us, this thing that can be another point of contention. It would finalize things, right, if they do go to arbitration, but you don't want to do it for the second year in a row when your franchise goalie, who's 25, coming off of an incredible playoff run, who has said multiple times he hates going to arbitration, wouldn't be that great if you once again have to kind of haggle over that and get into another contract dispute. So, again, having that deadline out of the way gives them more time. Again, does that mean like we're going to get a Swayman contract in like a day or so? Who knows? Like we'll see. Swayman's around this entire summer, I believe. So you'd hope it's done sooner rather than later, but there's no timeline to it, right? Like I think Pasternak, when he signed his his last kind of RFA contract, I think was in September, like right before camp started. So
yep, it was.
These things can easily carry into August and September if it gets to it. But I think as much as there's probably a set resolution with arbitration, I think it's a step forward for both Swayman and the Bruins to be like, all right, we'll we'll bridge this gap. We're still debating. We're still trying to find what the right number is, the right term, all that stuff. But to have this kind of 2-month runway to continue to kind of go back and forth and operate, I think, in good faith without having to resort to the nuclear option of arbitration for the second year in a row, I view it as a step in the right direction. But I do think it's good to, again, I'll look really dumb when Swayman signs at like 5:00 today or he signs tomorrow. But I think the fact that you do have this 2-month kind of window here to negotiate, and he's more or less kind of the last thing on the to-do list. You look at their cap space and how many guys are really left in free agency. Like this is kind of the last thing they got to do. They don't really have to rush this. And then the Bruins aren't on a time crunch of like, all right, we give up. Like, fine. You want 8.5, you want 8.7, fine, we'll do it. Like they can still operate with that, with kind of this leeway, and Swayman can still operate without having to look down the road and see another arbitration hearing a few weeks down the road either. So I think it helps both groups to kind of get to this agreement of no arbitration moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I do wonder what the haggling is over with, is it price? Is it term? Like, does Jeremy Swayman want a shorter term deal to make more, a 4 or 5 year deal or something like that? Sort of kind of what Austin Matthews has done up in Toronto, where it's like, hey, I know the cap's going to jump. I want more money down the line, which is risky for a goalie. which is very risky for a goalie because, I think if you're a guy like Austin Matthews, you know pretty well you're going to be scoring a lot of goals, and that next contract is going to be quite high. With Swayman, you don't know that. And that's not to say he's not a good goalie. It's not like I'm running the arbitration hearings against Jeremy Swayman or anything. But you do have to consider, like, goaltending can be fickle. You can have one really good year. You can, go back to the middle in that next year. Things happen. And so I wonder if it's that. Price-wise, I think we all agree it should be somewhere around $8 million. I don't know why, the projections have it around that. The pundits, 8 million seems pretty agreeable or around there. So I do wonder what it ends up being price-wise, because I feel like 8 times 8 is pretty simple considering they look at him as the number one goalie.
Yeah, I mean, it can go in a whole bunch of different ways, and it could be based on how the Bruins are approaching, but also how Swayman's maybe approaching. And maybe Swayman wants a 40-year deal, and he's banking on the fact he's going to get even better. And maybe a couple years from now, when you look at how the cap's jumping up, he's like, I can get $10.5 million. That's a gamble, right? You would think that a player would want to operate with 8x8 and lock that in, and he's still 33 when he hits the market again, and who the hell knows what the cap's going to look like by then, right? So
I hit the wrong thing.
Oh my goodness! I was getting zoomed out in space there.
We went out into space.
Yeah, Jesus.
There we go. That's more like it.
but you look at it, right? Like, in terms of Swayman, could be banking on maybe like more of a bridge 4 or 5 year deal. The Bruins could be looking at that in terms of maybe just kicking the can down the road. But again, as you mentioned it, I think the thing that works best for everyone is like an 8-year deal for a payout that more or less fits in with what Swayman's probably looking for, right? Because I saw, I think The Athletic had a thing of different projections, and one had 6.57, which, if the Bruins are trying to argue with that, I think good luck. But you also have to look at it, right? Swayman's this guy that, even if maybe he doesn't have the individual resume of a Sorokin who was a Vezina finalist yet, you look at how good Swayman's been. He's improved every year. He had that unbelievable playoff run. If you're the Bruins and you're hoping this guy continues to get better, why not just lock him into 8x8? If it's almost it's like Lindholm. If it's 8 and 7.75, you'll probably be doing backflips, because it just seems like the value is going to continue to get better and better as this goes on with the cap jumping up. So I could see from Swayman's perspective, right, of also where he kind of fits in the hierarchy, right? You've got a lot of very good young goalies that are going to go to market pretty soon. If he's the guy who's going to be setting the floor for what these next guys are going to make, like Shesterkin and Ottinger and these kind of players, maybe he is I have to get at least 8.25 and kind of set that benchmark for these next goalies. That could also be a factor as well. So you would think that the best way to bridge the gap is 8x8, but we'll kind of see. It could be both Swayman's camp or the Bruins camp kind of changing how they want to approach his contract.
Yeah, 6.5 or 7 for Swayman you'd do yesterday. I mean, that'd be an easy one. And I think it's interesting because you mentioned the resume element to Swayman of he's been good, and he's had he had a great postseason, but he hasn't been the 60 games starter ever. It's only been a couple of years. But as we see in sports more and more, teams lock up exciting young prospects to long-term deals that sort of look like gambles, but if they pay off, they look like cheap deals. You look like Tage Thompson in Buffalo. You look at, the Atlanta Braves did it a ton with a bunch of their players. The Red Sox kind of did it with Sedin Rafaela, which that seems to be working out so far. So again, I mean, I think, it's a similar thing to Swayman, although I think what you have more than if Swayman was, just out of Providence. If this was if they were doing this to Bussy or something.
Right.
Which I don't think they would do. Anyways, before we get into a big question I have, it's been on my mind recently after free agency, I want to talk about our good friends over at PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. With the finals over, the hoop action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is heating up. stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Brianna Stewart and AJ Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. And there's also the MLB. The Red Sox are battling for a playoff spot, and PrizePicks makes the action even more fun. How about that Jarren Duran, Rafi Devers? Tyler O'Neill looks like the real deal too. And I was a big PrizePicks fan during the Celtics run to the NBA Finals, and not to brag, but I was a winner. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Question I've had recently, ever since the Bruins went out and got Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm at free agency, are the Bruins legit Stanley Cup contenders next year? I was looking at power rankings this morning from ESPN, and they had the Bruins at number 7. I haven't had a chance to look at the odds yet for next season. I'm sure they've moved around quite a bit. I'm sure the Nashville Predators have jumped up as a team that has some pretty good odds. But I gotta say, yeah, I think I think the Bruins are definitely Stanley Cup contenders next year. You look at up front, obviously we've talked about the second line right wing spot that's sort of up in the air. The rest of the lineup, though, like that, to me, that's the one lineup question. I don't think they have any other pressing things. I mean, your backup is either Korpisalo or Bussy. We've talked a lot about that. But again, you have both those guys. Your D seems pretty locked up. Your bottom 6, there's lots of options there. Obviously there's some questions about Brad Marchand in terms of, he's getting up there in age and, what's the effectiveness? Who's he going to be playing with? I get that, but Lindholm with Pastrnak, to me, that's a Stanley Cup contender. And I saw Jay Fresh had his first projections ahead to next season. Jay Fresh, awesome Twitter follow. If you guys don't already follow him, he's the man. Had the Bruins in 3rd in the Atlantic, which I was kind of surprised about. Which again, can't argue with analytics. I'm not going to be like, oh, his algorithm stinks, Connor. It's wrong again. It's very good. It's a very good algorithm. But I think the Bruins are 1 or 2 in the Atlantic. Am I crazy?
No, I agree. And again, in terms of a contender, yeah, I think they're right in the mix, which I think we've said countless times, right, Evan? As long as you're in the mix, you got a shot in terms of these teams and you look at the way the Bruins are built, right, with their decor, how Zadorov adds an added element there. How, and it's not just the physicality. Obviously, I think it's what everyone points to, and the Bruins could definitely use that. And I think it's going to come in handy, especially in the playoffs. But, and not just him, but I think that Max Jones, Kastelik, Beecher, if that's kind of the grouping on the 4th line, a lot of speed, a lot of physicality there as well. I think that could be a really, really fun line to watch. But yeah, they seem like they've kind of seen what these other teams around the NHL are doing in terms of a lot of mobility, a lot of size on the back end, a lot of skill up front, a lot of, emphasis on speed with their forwards, especially kind of in that bottom 6 grouping. They're going to be a competitive team, especially when you've got that decor and especially that goalie. If Swayman can build off of last year, yeah, you got a pretty good shot. Again, the Bruins could not hit the net in the playoffs last year, and they took the Panthers to a pretty competitive 6 games, in the second round. What happens if your defense is even better? What happens if a few other guys step up? And again, as you said, they have question marks. When you look, especially I think on the scoring front, you kind of need a guy like Lysell or Merkulov to break out. You need guys like Geeky and Frederick to continue to take steps forward. You need Lindholm to be live up to expectations in terms of what his contract's going to be. You need the things to fall your way. But how many other teams are going into this year without similar question marks, right? Look at the Oilers, who are a great team. They went to the Stanley Cup final. I still don't feel that great about their goalie situation. You look at that goal that went right by Skinner from Reinhart. That was the series winning goal. Not great. Needed a save there in a pretty important moment. Look at Toronto. Their team, I assume, is Toronto who Jay Fresh has as 2nd in the Atlantic?
I think so. I'll
yeah. So, I mean,
my
if
Wi-Fi
them,
will my Wi-Fi will tank,
yeah.
But
Let's operate with the assumption that it's going to be Toronto. How's their goalie situation? Is Chris Tanev going to stop the pucks from flying into the back of the net? All right, you look at Tampa. You got a guy like Gensel, but you're a pretty top heavy team there. Esamont and some of these guys are in featured roles on that lineup now. that are going to be tasked with like driving play. Like, again, you've got Point, Kucherov, all those players, but all of a sudden the well gets pretty dry once you get past like the first 3-4 guys in that lineup. That they need a lot of other guys to step up for them as well. Like, Carolina, they lost a whole bunch of guys. New York Rangers, like, they can't get anyone to move to take on Trouba. They can't get Trouba to waive his no trade clause. And again,
that
like the whole
is
thing
a
with
mess.
yeah, and the whole
Holy
thing with
crap,
the Rangers is like
he's coming to the Bruins. Remember, he's coming to the Bruins.
Exactly. But like they run into the same conundrum every year of like how reliant they are on their special team scoring and how they can deliver at 5-on-5. You're going to have these questions about like Zibanejad in the playoffs. Like every team has these questions of like, they're competitive. But so if the Bruins are in that spot and their strengths lie in kind of what you need to follow your way in the playoffs in terms of a great defense and a really strong goaltending, and you figure out the scoring along the way, and maybe it all works out. Maybe Lysel's 18 goal scorer and he has a great season, or maybe you have to address at the deadline. You can, I think, roll with the punches and try to shore up your offense as the year goes on. But if your strengths are rooted in your goaltending and defense, and you've got a battle-tested group that had a pretty successful playoff run last year, I think you like your chances. Are you the favorites? No. Probably out of that whole group, Florida probably has the fewest amount of question marks, even though they've lost guys like OEL and Montour, but they're still a pretty damn good team. It's really deep. But other than that, like, you got a shot. And if you push the Panthers to 6 games and your team's probably better and more equipped to handle the Panthers, I think if you're a Bruins fan, you should just like where you are right now. You're in the mix, if not one of the, I think, 4 or 5 teams that have a pretty good shot. You look just the way your team is constituted right now as we're recording in early July.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Florida is like they did technically get worse, and they've been to 2 straight cups. Like that takes a toll. We say this, we said that with Tampa for a long time. Like that takes a toll on a team. It's hard to go to 3 straight. Now the Florida team's great. Like the core pieces of Tkachuk, Reinhart, Barkov, Bobrovsky, like that's not a fun team to deal with. And I would agree with you. They're probably the favorites. You also have the Devils now. Like the New Jersey Devils look to be in a better position than they were last year. They have high expectations. They were big spenders. They went out and got Jacob Markstrom from the Flames. And then, like you mentioned, the Leafs, like who is in net for them? Joseph Wall. That's their one hope. Like maybe it works out. He has a good track record coming up, up to Toronto, but like, is he ready to be the full-time starter? And they got like Matt Murray and Anthony Stolarz up there. So like, their number one problem is still not fixed until, maybe if Wall puts together a great season, then, they'll have a real goalie. But like, until that happens, I don't know who they have in net. I don't know, what fixes that problem. Now they do have Berube. They do have Craig Berube. But it's funny because the Bruins do have a big question mark. And we talked about this kind of with the second line right wing spot, but it hits at a bigger thing that I think was sort of a huge problem for them in the playoffs last year. I want to get to that. But first, quick word from our friends over at Gametime. The Stanley Cup final is over, and what a thriller it was. The Celtics are NBA champions. With hockey and basketball playoffs over, attention turns to the MLB. And is there a better activity to do during the summer than hitting the ballparks? Nothing beats a summer night at Fenway Park. A Fenway frag, an ice cold beverage, and the crack of the bat. It's a nice change of pace from the heart-pounding intensity of the NHL and NBA playoffs. Just pure relaxation, good weather, and great vibes. I feel like every year I make a slew of fond memories at Fenway. For me, last year it was in Chicago watching the Red Sox take down the Cubs at historic Wrigley Field. Gotta say, Cubs fans, very nice people. Want to go to a game this summer? Go check out Gametime, the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. That's right, they go down. I love how easy to navigate the app is. The flash deals are awesome if you want to go to a game last minute. It's the perfect place. Save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Not to mention the views from all seats in the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So that question I kind of alluded to was scoring in general. The Bruins had trouble scoring last year in the playoffs. The one true scorer on that team is David Pastrnak. Outside of that, there isn't a strong second candidate. I mean, Marchand obviously historically has been a large producer. Hopefully this year for him, you see more, even more production. But I think Elias Lindholm helps that answer that question of, all right, now you have a real number one center who's going to be paired with Pastrnak. You're going to have Zacha on the wings, which, in 22-23, he was great there. So I think you have that. And that answers that big question of, or it doesn't fully answer it, but it answers some of it. I still am skeptical about that second line, but is that enough for me to say, no, they're not cup contenders? No, I think either Lysell fits there, or they address it by making a trade at the deadline to get a second line winger. Because, as you said, I think the East is wide open. You mentioned the Panthers is like the favorite, and they probably are, and the odds probably have them there. I don't think it's overwhelming, though. I'm not like, oh, it's the Panthers and then everybody else. It's just wide open.
Yeah, and again, you look at like Lysell is the obvious guy you look at, where I think a lot probably hinges if he comes into camp and he's dynamic during preseason play, and you can comfortably say, the first, second week of October that he's good to go there and you can pencil him in, that's great. Hell, I'd take even if like the third line is some assortment of like Frederick, Poitras, and Lysell, and it gives you two really young players with a guy like Frederick who is physical but also has like that knack for just whatever line he's on, he makes his line mates better. Like if that's your third line and you operate with like Geeky starting off, you'll probably take that and see where those guys can develop. Hell, like Morgan Geeky, I think exceed a lot of expectations. And if he's with Marchand and Coyle, it's not bad. Like you can probably get more production out of a guy like Geeky, as has been the case for a lot of these guys when they put up into top six roles. Like the Bruins, it's not like it at all, I think, rests on like if Lysell hits, that's great. Makes your life a lot easier. You don't have to go and trade for someone. You don't have to spend money on a guy that's cost controlled and is a really dynamic player. But if it doesn't work out, you do have other options before you even have to get to the, DEFCON 1, right? Of like, maybe it's Frederick, who's played well with Coyle before, and maybe he's due for, maybe he's another level to hit. Maybe it's Geeky, someone like that. Hell, like maybe it's Justin Brazeau or someone that gets a look there if they think he can build off of what he showcased last season as well. Like the Bruins at least have options of ways to figure things out. Is it as set in stone as if you retained DeBrusk or if you signed Toffoli? No, of course not. It would make you feel a lot better because you really don't have to worry about that. You have Toffoli, you're like, all right, he's going to fall ass backwards and get 25 goals. That's like what he's done his entire career. But the Bruins at least do have ways to kind of fill that gap, at least for right now. Now, again, check in middle of December if it's Lysell who flamed out early on and Geeky's struggling to, he's got a 10-game goalless stretch, then it's not great. Then you got to address it. But for now, at least, I don't think that one vacancy, as critical as a top six role is, right? I don't think it's something that it's like the Bruins have no one there. They have options. And again, if things don't work out, what's the case every year during the deadline, right? Where there's 4 or 5 20-goal scorers who are dangled out there. So again, it's what we talked about with them, like prioritizing a guy like Zadorov. If a guy like Zadorov is dangled out at the trade deadline, a 6'6" mobile defenseman who's really mean and really nasty, you're paying a steep price for a player like that. Not to say that a 20-goal scorer is going to come cheap, but it's more agreeable, I think, in terms of what the price would be, as opposed to if you were prioritizing a defenseman in that same spot.
I mean, look what the price was for Hampus Lindholm 3 years ago at the deadline. Yeah. Like, it's not cheap to get a top 4 legit defenseman. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing I wouldn't count out is Georgi Merkulov. Georgi Merkulov has had 2 really productive seasons in the AHL. Now, I think they'd rather keep him down the middle. I think it's better suited for him down the middle. But like, I wouldn't be shocked. I mentioned this on my mailbag episode last week of Bruins Beat. Wouldn't shock me if he's a third-line center. Like, he's played a lot more than Matt Poitras has. At least last season, Poitras still recovering from an injury. You do wonder if Poitras begins the year in Providence, based on how he is in training camp. But you also wonder, like, is Merkulov so good that they're like, we got to find a spot for him in the top 9? Like, this guy's so productive. He needs to play. And again, like, playing him on the fourth line for 8 minutes a night is not going to be what gets him ingratiated in the NHL. You're going to need to give him a consistent shift. You're going to need to give him ozone time. And the fourth line is not the place for that. So I do wonder if he's in the mix as well. Maybe not for that second line right wing spot, but if they futz with the lines a little bit, if they get to a point where Marchand's up with Lindholm and Pastrnak, and Zaka's centering the second line or something, or they put Coyle on the wing. Like I think there is I think there's also Merkulov too. So I think Merkulov's another interesting case there in that top 9. But should be interesting. We have a lot we can talk about this offseason. Definitely a lot. Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we'll have you covered every step of the way this offseason, whether it's the Swayman contract, maybe other trades, looking ahead at roster projections. I think we'll be looking at doing our first kind of depth chart breakdown, which I'm sure will look terrible in a couple of months when camp actually begins. But we'll have that over at Boston.com and the Globe. Plenty more stuff, so you can read all of my stuff over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, you can do that at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We're presented by PrizePicks and Gametime. You Bruins Beat listeners have a great rest of your week.